All right, hello once again. This is Jeff Scott from Jeff Teaches Programming. In the last video, as you can see up there, number 91, we finished up converting our payroll GUI app into an object-oriented programming app, and we went over why you do it, what it bought us, etc. I'm going to switch gears now, and I'm going to talk about databases. And the way I'm going to do this is a little bit different. And that is, I'm going to tell you a little story, true story about me. All right. Now, for many years, I worked in a food store, and it really wasn't going anywhere. I mean, I did pretty well. I actually made pretty good money, but I really wasn't going anywhere. Didn't have much of a future. Okay. Then, through a person that I was related to, they got a job as a programmer. And when they got this job, they were asked if they wanted to go in and, basically come into the town, look for a place to live, etc. Well, the person at the time was my brother-in-law, now my ex-brother-in-law. And his wife had had a baby just a week earlier, so she really wasn't in the mood to go. I was on vacation from my job at the food store, and he asked me if I wanted to go. And I said, sure. So we did. Drove with him out to Naperville, Illinois, and got to the hotel room. And we were sitting there talking, and I left for a couple minutes, just went out to get a soda and came back in, and my ex-brother-in-law was on the phone. And he was talking to somebody, and he said, yeah, he can be there tomorrow. And then he said, I'll see you later, bye. And he hung up the phone. I said, who can be there tomorrow? He said, I've got you an interview. I said, for what? And he said, for a possible job. Okay. That's not why I'd come there. I had blue jeans on and a t-shirt. So we went out and went to the mall, and literally I bought the clothes off the mannequin. I bought a suit and everything else. Long story short, I ended up going back to school, getting a 2-year degree. I'd already had a 4-year degree in journalism, but I went back, got a 2-year degree, and at the time was referred to as data processing, and ended up getting a job at the same place my ex-brother-in-law was employed at. All right, why am I telling you this? Well, before all that happened, before I got the job, in the summer, I moved so I could go to a school that had available openings in their data processing program, and I decided to take a class. Well, that class I wanted to take wasn't offered at the school I was going to go to, so I basically just decided to take a class at an extension. It was a university extension. I wasn't going to get credit for it. I was just auditing the class. And I sat there, and the first day I went in the class. The teacher talked. Basically, it was like he took a deep breath, and he just exhaled and talked for an hour. And when he got done, this is what he said. Okay, your first assignment will be, I want you to create a simple program that reads a set of random numbers into an array, sorts the array, and then prints out only all of the prime numbers contained in the array. Well, some people in the class were kind of snickering because they said, this is going to be simple. Not me. All right, I was a novice. I knew what a random number was. I wasn't sure what an array was. I wasn't even sure what a prime number was. All right, and I didn't have something where I could key something into the computer and have it print out a program for me. I didn't even have an internet where I could Google something. So what did I do? I went to the library, and I used something that's referred to as a card catalog. It looked like this. And I opened it up, and the first thing I looked for was arrays. So I looked at one of the top ones up here, and there was a mathematical book that talked about arrays. And they also mentioned prime numbers. Well, that got me started. So basically, I went through something like this. Why am I even telling you that? Well, for lack of better words, that kind of, at least, was my first foray into the world of databases. Because in many ways, a database is a very organized digital filing cabinet. All right, so I showed you this picture, okay, and you can see we've got a lot of drawers in here. You could look at each drawer that was in here as being what we're going to refer to as a table. Okay, each one of these things that are in here that you see in here, each one of these things you could look at as being what's called a record. Each thing that was in there on each record would be called a field. And if we put all that stuff together, basically we have the beginning of a database system. So I'm going to go over it in more detail, but I just thought maybe that would help as we get into this. Maybe not. All right. So the first thing I want to do is I want to show you what I'm going to start going over in this particular lecture. I've got 3 resources here that you might be interested in, and I'm going to show them in reverse order. The first one is about a 4-hour-long course on what's called SQL. SQL is an acronym that stands for Structured Query Language. Some people call it SQL, some people call it SQL. It's the same thing. It's about 4 hours long. It's from a thing called freecodecamp.org. Great site. As it says, SQL and database is a full course for beginners. And these are all the different stuff that's covered in there. And as it says, it's about 4 hours long. Next, this is from a thing called Khan Academy. All right. And it's Unit 3, Intro to SQL, Querying and Managing Data. I like this because everything that's in here is hyperlinked. They go through basics, then they go through some advanced stuff, and then they go through other stuff, etc. And it's just to get you started. But the one I'm going to go over with you now is this one. Now, w3schools.com is one of the best sites that I've ever seen. It's unbelievable with the content that it has, and it's free. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. If you go out to W3 Schools itself, you'll notice you can get information on all sorts of stuff, including they even have a C# tutorial. All right? But when we look at the tutorials that are in there, somewhere in here, there is an SQL, and that's the one I showed you. All right? So this is what I'm going to go through right now. I'm not going to go through every line of this, but we're going to talk about it. So again, a database is pretty much a digital filing cabinet. Each drawer in that cabinet represents a table. Each folder inside of the drawer is called a row or a record. The different pieces of information would be called columns or fields. All right? So, you could store data in a spreadsheet. For years, that's what people did. But as the data gets larger and more complex, spreadsheets are harder to use. All right? There's 2 basic ways that people usually store data. And one is they use files, and the other one is they use databases. I'm not going over files in here. We could. And file basically is just, you know, you're saving something out to a file. I mean, if I go out to here, there's some folders, and there's some more folders, and there's some files in the folders. All right? Now, I'm talking about SQL. Structured Query Language. As it says, it's a standard language for being able to store information into a database, manipulate that data, meaning change it, meaning adding stuff to it, changing things that are in it or removing things that are in it, and also retrieving data in a database. All right, as you can see, there's many other, SQL is a standard. And it's used by the databases that you see here, the database types: MySQL, SQL Server, MS Access, Oracle, etc. Now, there's no way in heck I could teach you all those. It would be stupid to even try. So we're going to concentrate, once we get going in here, on SQL Server, because that's pretty much the standard language that's used with Microsoft. In Microsoft Visual Studio, and in our case, Microsoft Visual Studio with C#. All right? Now, they're going to go through examples. There'll be all sorts of stuff that we'll do in here. Some of it won't make a lot of sense, but I'd recommend that you go over this tutorial when you get some time. So here's an introduction. Again, I already mentioned this to you. SQL stands for Structured Query Language. All right? It actually was created as a mathematical type of language about, really, 50 years ago. As it says, it allows you to access and manipulate databases. Some of the stuff it can do, I'm not going to read these all to you. Some of these I've already mentioned. But we want to be able to create databases and then work with the data that's in the database. We want to be able to ask the database questions, also known as queries. And based on those queries, we can retrieve data from a database. We also want to be able to do basic operations on a database, which include inserting new things into a database, updating or changing existing things in the database, deleting or removing things from a database, creating more databases, adding to databases, writing our own programs for databases, creating what are called views of databases. Okay? So they talk about building a website. We'll get into that, but not right now. We're going to start working with what's called an RDBMS, a Relational Database Management System. All right? As it says, the data in an RDBMS is stored in database objects called tables. Now, if I confused you with that stuff, and I'm going to go back to this example I put in here. All right, think about this. What's a character? Basically, it's any keyboard character. And it's actually more than that, because there's other characters that you can put in that aren't in a keyboard. But if I put one or more characters together, I have what's called a field. Now you might say, one? Well, yeah, couldn't I have a field that was called middle initial? My middle initial is P. That would be one character. All right. If I put one or more related fields together, now I have a record. If I put one or more related records together, I have a table. Now, if you can start to understand what I just put on the screen here, you're on your way to understanding databases. So databases, also known as a DB, short for database, all right, are one or more related tables. Tables are one or more related records. Records are one or more related fields. Fields are one or more related characters. So imagine we had this. So let's say we put in here Jeff Scott, I'm not going to put my address, but 123 Main Street, Anytown, USA, 123445. Okay? Well, you can see what these characters are. What might we have in here for fields? How about a first name field, a last name field, an address field, a city field, a state field, and a zip code field. We'll say any town, I don't know, Missouri. So first name would be Jeff, last name would be Scott, address would be 123 Main Street, city would be Anytown, state would be Missouri, and zip would be 12345. So I'm showing you characters and how we put those into a field. If we put all the information about me in there, that would represent a record. If we added another person here, so let's say Sam Smith, and let's say they live at 22 Main Street, also at Anytown, Missouri, 12345. Now I've got two records of information. Each record consists of 6 different fields: a first name field, a last name field, an address field, a city field, a state field, and a zip code field. Okay? Now hopefully that makes at least a little bit of sense to you. I'm going to show you another couple pictures here, at least one more for now. This is what a table might look like. Now, there's some stuff in here that I didn't put in. There's some stuff in here that I did put in. I had a first name and a last name. I had an address and a city and a state. But in this example, we're using what's called an ID. A first name, a last name, a phone, and a country. Why is an ID important? An ID, in this case, usually something that has ID in it, is called a primary key. It uniquely identifies a record. Would it be possible if we had a customers table that we had 2 customers named David Robinson? Of course it's possible. How would we differentiate between those two then? Maybe we have a David Robinson in the UK, and maybe we have another one from the USA. But if they had different IDs, we'd be able to distinguish between the two. Now, this is what's called a relational database. There is a relationship. We'll get to that in just a second. This would represent a table. There are 5 records in this table. Each record has 5 fields. So there's 25 pieces of data right now in this table. Where the power in this is what you're able to do in here is you'll be able to grab information from tables and related tables and bring those together. So we've got this customer table. I know it's a little hard to see right here, but it's the same one we looked at before. And now we've got an order table. And you'll notice if you look in here, if you look closely, hopefully you can see it all right. Can I make that bigger and have you still see everything? Not really. All right. We've got the customer ID field in both tables. This is an order ID. So this says that order was made by customer 5. That order was made by customer 2. So the paper 500 was made by Betty Doe. All right. When you're working with what's called a relational database, You can relate tables to one another. That's the relationship between those. Now, like I said, that you might look at that and go, that makes sense. Or you might look at that and say, that makes no sense. And either way, it's okay, because we're going to work with this. There's nothing you need to memorize right now. All right. There'll be a lot of tools that we'll use that'll automate a lot of this. Everybody makes mistakes. All right. We'll talk about problems databases can solve, not how they're implemented, but why they're used. And basically, again, they give us a way to take information and work with that information. I read once something along the lines of a database is a structured way to store information. And once you've done that, a computer can work with that information. All right? So let's imagine that this was a business. All right? And what you see on here right now. And you need to keep track of customers and their orders. Okay? Well, there's a lot of ways we could do it. We could do it with a spreadsheet. But if we had thousands of customers, that could be very difficult to manage. We could do it with files. But the same kind of thing. A database would be ideal for something like this. All right? So again, as we mentioned, a database is kind of like a very organized digital filing cabinet. All right? Again, the cabinet itself could represent the database, each drawer a table, each folder in the drawer a record. The labels on the folder would be the columns, etc. All right? Hopefully that makes at least a little bit of sense to you. All right? Now, databases allow you to store a lot of information, find information quickly, and be able to manipulate that information. Not just get it, but change it, add to it, delete from it, etc. quickly. A database doesn't just store data, it helps answer questions. If I wanted to know who ordered 1,000 books, I could ask the database and it would come back. And rather than just telling me customer 1, it could tell me, oh, it was John Doe, or it was John Doe from the United States. Real databases, the kind we'll work with, have more than one table, or at least usually have more than one table. In this case, we've got two tables, a customer table and an order table. All right? Databases are used all the time. I mean, imagine that you worked in a bank. Think of all the hundreds, literally, of transactions that can take place in a bank every day. People removing money, people adding money, people moving money between accounts, etc. Database is ideal for something like that. All right? So again, we're going to be using SQL. That is one of the main languages. There's also other languages you can use besides SQL-based languages. In fact, there's even something called NoSQL, which is really a misnomer. It doesn't mean NoSQL. The NO stands for not only SQL. But we're going to concentrate in here on using SQL, and then when we get there, SQL Server. It's a language that we can use to talk to a database. All right? So if we said, for example, show me all the customers that are from the United States, we could ask to show me where the country is equal to USA, and it would show us those too. If for some reason we wanted just the people whose last name started with an R, I don't know why you do that, but if you did, we could ask for that and just get these two. All right? if we wanted everybody with the last name of Doe. Okay. So a database allows us to organize information. We use the tables to store the data. We use the rows for the individual records, and the columns or fields for the type of information. All right, that's what I wanted to show you to get started. Now, what I'm going to do next, I think, at least, because I haven't done this yet myself, is I'm going to quickly build you a database and take a look at it, what it might have, etc., how we might use it, etc. Okay, so I'll be back with that soon.